The book of Jeremiah has been one that I've really been focused on a lot in the last few years. And it's always been a book that I've really been kind of drawn to. But for some reason, during the time of our pandemic, the book of Jeremiah just kind of lit up for me. And part of it was because Jeremiah was a prophet who tried to speak to the people during a time of struggle. And it was particularly part of his message that God is going to allow things to happen to you that you are not going to be happy about, but God is going to remain with you. And this time will actually be a time where, yeah, you're tested, but really more of what God is doing is forming you into a new people. And so I've just been really drawn to that. And the other day, I was reading through sections of Jeremiah, and I came to what was kind of a strange story that happens right in the midst of this book of prophecy, Jeremiah, and it really goes over several chapters, 41 through 43. Now, again, recapping the story real quickly, the people of Israel are being taken prisoner by Babylonians. And Nebuchadnezzar has come and defeated Jerusalem and has wiped out Jerusalem, destroyed the city, destroyed the temple, and now a remnant of them had been taken back to Babylon where they lived as exiles. But there was another remnant that stayed there in Jerusalem, and they remained in Jerusalem, and they lived in this torn down city. So you can imagine morale was pretty difficult during that time. Well, in the story of Jeremiah 41 through 43, we read of a time where one of the remaining commanders there in Jerusalem causes an uprising with some of those who have been left as the remnant. And he goes and he assassinates the Babylonian ruler who had been left there in Jerusalem to rule the people. Now, you would think that would be good news, but in reality, this was not what God wanted to have happen. And at that same time that this remnant came and defeated the Babylonian ruler that was left there, there was another group of the remnants who understood that this probably wasn't what God wanted to have happen. And so that leader of that other remnant piece came in and chased out the rebellious folks that had done the assassination. All right. So at the end of this time, there is this remnant of people led by Johanan, and he now recognizes or realizes we may be in big trouble here because we, meaning the remnant of the people of Israel, have just assassinated a Babylonian. And he is very much afraid of what is going to happen. And so he goes to Jeremiah and he says to Jeremiah, what should we do? Because his plan is to take that people, and his plan is to take and have them kind of escape to Egypt where they'll live and supposedly be safe. And so he asked Jeremiah to seek God's wisdom in all of this. Well, Jeremiah does. And he takes time in prayer to go to God, and then he comes back to this commander and he says, God doesn't want you to go to Egypt. He wants you to stay put right where you are. And he says he wants you to trust that God is going to protect you. Yes, it may be tough, but God is going to protect you. And then in this one verse in Jeremiah 42:11, these are part of Jeremiah's words. He said, do not be afraid of the king of Babylon as you have been. Do not be afraid of him, says the Lord, for I am with you to save you and rescue you from his hand. In other words, Jeremiah is saying it's time for you to stay put and trust that God's going to see you through. Don't go to Egypt. Well, as you probably could imagine, they heard this and they don't trust. And so they go to Egypt anyway. And they actually take Jeremiah with them as they go off to Egypt. And it turns out to be this terrible choice because they end up being wiped out because of their choice. God had warned them, and they didn't listen. Well, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking of this, and I named this particular devotional Trusting. And then I went and did this little thing where I was looking for synonyms of trusting. And do you know what words came up as a synonym of trusting? Gullible, naive. Those are synonyms of the word trusting. And put that in the context of what this story then says. We need to be people who would trust in God. We are to be trusting in the word of the Lord, which by some standards would make us be gullible or naive. You know, I think sometimes that's how trusting feels. When we try to trust somebody and we get taken advantage of, we think we are just being naive or gullible. And you know, sometimes when we trust God to make things right in our life and it doesn't turn out exactly as we had planned, maybe we begin to think, oh, I was just gullible. I was just naive. God's not really with me. In reality, this idea of trusting God needs to go beyond what the circumstances and the immediate events might happen or might be happening in our lives. We have to let go of worrying about controlling the situation for our own well-being, because God is with us and God knows how to guide us. Now here's the problem with this devotional. Those people had a very clear understanding of what God wanted them to do. They had a Jeremiah that told them exactly what God wanted them to do, and we don't always have a Jeremiah, and we don't always have this clear understanding. And yet, if we prayerfully come to God, and we really truly find ourselves in a place of trust, and maybe God sends us the spirit of calm or spirit of understanding, or sends someone into our life that helps us get to that place of trusting, maybe that's all we need. It's tough. It was tough for the people of Israel back then, and it's tough for us now. And yet we know that we have a God that we can trust with our whole life.